Pushkin.
His first afternoon at Lawrenceville, he began by shooting 14-foot jump shots from the right side.
That's John McPhee, now 93 years old, the grand master of literary nonfiction. He's reading for us from the first book he ever published, back in 1965. He called the book A Sense of Where You Are. It was about a Princeton University basketball player named Bill Bradley.
He got off to a bad start, and he kept missing them. 6 in a row hit the back rim of the basket and bounced out.
The writer had talked the player into letting him watch his private workout. It was just the two of them, alone in some high school gym that Bradley had never been in before.
He stopped, looking discomfited, and seemed to be making an adjustment in his mind. Then he went up for another jump shot from the same spot and hit it cleanly.
I'm 11 years old when I read what John McPhee wrote about Bill Bradley. But I don't care about John McPhee. I only want to know more about Bill Bradley. At this point, he's in the NBA, and I've set up a hoop in my bedroom to create the upcoming 1972 finals, which I care about only because Bradley will be in them. I play out this entire 2-hour game. I also serve as the play-by-play announcer into a tape recorder I've set up on my desk.
Los Angeles 71, New York 70.
Knicks down by 1, 5 seconds left. Bradley in heavy traffic. Bradley dribbles left. Bradley shoots. It's good.
Bradley got away from McMillan. Jackson knocked it in.
I'm a little madman with a private obsession. After each game, I sit down and listen to my 2 hours of tape to create box scores, to see how well Bill Bradley did, even though I had just done it. This is how I really begin as a sports fan, with emulation. I want to be like Bill Bradley, which is why I bothered to find a whole book about him and read it.
4 more shots went in without a miss, and then he paused and said, "You want to know something? That basket is about 1.5 inches low."
The main thing I learned from the book is that if I want to be Bill Bradley, it won't just happen. It won't be easy. When Bradley was himself 11 years old, he shot baskets until his fingers bled. By the time he got to Princeton, he'd shot so many different basketballs on so many different hoops that when he missed, he knew that the problem wasn't him. It was the hoop.
Some weeks later, I went back to Lawrenceville with a steel tape, borrowed a stepladder, and measured the height of the basket. It was 9 feet 10 7/8 inches above the floor, or 1 1/8 inches too low.
Much later, I'd realized that all the time I thought I was learning how to be Bill Bradley, I was actually learning how to be John McPhee. But that's another story. Anyway, 11-year-old me would never believe what I'm about to do. When you were a player, when did you first have the sense that kids were looking at you as an example of excellence?
Thousands, literally thousands of fathers would bring their son, or mothers or daughter, or father bring a daughter or whatever to the game. And they'd always say, you want to be like Bradley. Well, I always disagreed with that.
I'm talking with Bill Bradley. For real.
No, you want to be like the father. You don't want to be like Bradley. But you want to be like Bradley in terms of the values that you see exemplified in the development of his game. Because that's what you want to do in your life to develop your skills to their highest and best use.
I'm Michael Lewis, and this is Against the Rules. This season, I'm looking at what's happening to the American fan. And in this episode, what happens when Bill Bradley's ideal of the game collides with the way other people think of it. Bill Bradley always seemed to have a plan. Basketball was just a piece of it. Before he got to Princeton, during his senior year in high school, he actually signed with Duke. But then the summer before college, he went on a trip to Europe.
And on one of those days, we toured Oxford. And I walked into Christ Church Quad, and looked around and thought to myself, I got to figure some way to get back here.
When he got home, he looked into it, learned about Rhodes Scholars, and that Princeton generated the most of them. So he wrote to Duke and told them he wasn't coming. Duke was pissed. Princeton scrambled to find him a bed. Bradley then nearly flunked out of the college.
I came from a small town, high school in 96. I had so-called low college board scores, and I certainly had no reference for French or biology, which were the two that gave me problems.
Basketball had already taught him that the harder you work, the better you get. He proceeded to spend so many hours in the Princeton library that he would graduate with honors. Midway through his senior year, he was offered the Rhodes Scholarship. The New York Knicks then took him with the first pick of the entire 1965 draft. Bradley thanked them politely, then left for Oxford to study for years. Even back then, people who didn't know Bill Bradley would hear about him and say, oh, it must be an act. But if it is an act, it's an act he's going to play his entire life. He totally embodies the values he talks about: sacrifice, discipline, selflessness, resilience. He's never going to lose, his Princeton advisor says about him. Do you know just how hard it is to defeat a 16th century Puritan? Late in his second year as a Rhodes Scholar, Bill Bradley realizes how much he misses basketball. And so he calls the Knicks and he tells them that after he's done with his scholarship and a stint in the Air Force, he's coming back to New York to play. And Knicks fans go crazy. But his first year on the team, he bombs. He's really just no good. He's paying a price for those 2 years in an Oxford library. For the first time in Bradley's life, the fans turn on him. They boo him. They holler insults. One day, a fan actually spits on him. But because he's Bill Bradley, he turns the other cheek, works his ass off, and improves. Over the next 6 years, he helps the Knicks win 2 NBA championships. And the fans love him all over again, now including me. When Bradley's done, they retire his jersey and hang it from the rafters of Madison Square Garden. Did fans in any way enter your imagination as a player?
They entered your imagination by the noise. I love the roar of the crowd. And it wasn't a fan, it was 20,000 fans. When your team came together and did something amazing, and the garden roof almost came off. And so the fans were instrumental in the experience for me as a player, as a whole, not as individuals.
The fans were the congregation, recipients of a kind of moral instruction, which Bradley always honestly tried to supply. He always carried himself with this superhuman dignity. Even at peak fame, he refused to endorse products. And then there was the sordid underbelly in sports, which he somehow managed to avoid really noticing until well into his pro career.
We were ahead by 6 points, and there were just seconds left, and I shot and hit the shot, and some people in the crowd booed. And I asked the trainer, why were they booing? We won by 8 points, not 6 points. That's good. He said, oh, well, those are people gambling on the game. And I thought, oh, that's sick. Because for me, the game was always about values. The idea of gambling on sports was always something that was counter to the values of the sport.
Bill Bradley retires from basketball in 1977 to run for public office. He'd become one of New Jersey's U.S. senators for almost 2 decades. And in that time, an argument would develop that no one really wanted to have between Bradley's ideas about sports and American life and what was actually going on in sports and American life. When did you make your first sports bets?
Well, my first sports bet was made probably in 7th or 8th grade and through high school, just betting the parlay cards. A buddy of mine used to bring in these green parlay sheets where you'd have to pick it 3 for 3, 4 for 4, 5 for 5. You bet $5-10.
His real name is Gadoon Kirolis, but he's always been known as Spanky, after a character from the TV show The Little Rascals, which his mom loved. Spanky grew up in Jersey City, born the year before Bill Bradley became the state senator.
He'd have one kid in the class that might have won, and, he'd win like, $50, $60, whatever, but most people lost. And then I started realizing, I'm like, hey, can I get in on this? The only thing I knew as a high school kid is the house always won, so I knew it was unfair because I never won.
Spanky maybe had an edge over some of the other kids at school, because at home he was basically raised on games of chance.
It was just a part of life. Every holiday we'd get together, Christmas, New Year's, we'd celebrate, we'd have dinner, and then we'd whip out the cards and we'd just play poker.
For actual money?
Oh, yeah, for actual money. And
so if you lost to your mom, she made you pay up?
Oh, yeah, I would just, this is my allowance and everything. This is the real deal. There's, my mom, and she taught me, a valuable lesson. Don't gamble what you're not willing to lose.
Spanky gambled and Spanky lost until Spanky started to gamble and win. By the time he entered high school, he was effectively running an illegal book of NFL parlays. Not simple bets on which team wins and loses, but compound bets that give you like 20-1 odds if you say, pick the winner of 5 different NFL games, and pay you nothing if you only get 4 right. Parlay cards, they would have been illegal when you were in high school?
100%.
Yeah. And so there's an illegal bookie in Hoboken?
Absolutely, yes.
And so he is using what, like some high school kid as a sort of a salesman?
As a runner, exactly.
As a runner. And these things are getting distributed in your school, and nobody stops it.
Not only is nobody stopping it, and I'm not going to name names, obviously, but there would be teachers that would fill out parlay cards and hand, you know what I mean. And it was a great school, big sports school, and just a part of life, gambling on sports, betting on sports, the football games and stuff. So, that's just what we did.
You're getting a different kind of education than I got.
Absolutely. From people that really weren't supposed to be teaching us this stuff, but it's just part of it.
We're laughing, but Spanky is learning something. He's learning why bookies exist. They always win. The kids all want to bet on the local teams, and so the local bookies shift the odds against them. Spanky sees the bookies exploiting fan loyalty and decides he wants a piece of the action. He takes the parlay cards from the bookie and gives them to a barber. The barber passes them out to customers, and the customers bet. Spanky then collects all the bets from the barber, but instead of handing them all to the bookie, he keeps some for himself. Which is to say that by high school, Spanky was a bookie. He wasn't stealing the bookie's money. He was stealing their business.
I don't wake up in the morning and say, I can't wait to break the law today, but, the money's the money. I figured with gambling and with bookmaking, it's really not that bad. It's not like I'm putting a gun to somebody's head and saying, you got to bet. They're the ones that are asking me, hey, you got the sheets yet? Are the sheets ready this week? It was just, like selling crack to a crack addict. It was just so easy.
At the same time that Spanky's raking it in the high school cafeteria, New Jersey Senator Bill Bradley is rising to political prominence. He sponsored bills on health care and gun control and the environment, but there was one issue he hadn't really touched that was dear to his heart. What got you interested in taking up gambling as an issue when you were in the Senate?
I'd never done anything on sports. In fact, I wouldn't even talk about sports. When I became a senator, I would never raise the issue of sports. Other senators would want to talk sometimes about, but I never raised it because I wasn't trying to bring basketball into my Senate life and have it affect that.
But at some point, Bradley couldn't resist. That point came when he decided to write a book about the moral influence of sports. Values of the game, he'd call it.
I thought about how gambling really didn't celebrate those values, to the contrary. And so I passed this little bill. It was not a big bill, it was a little bill that banned sports betting in the states that didn't have it. And it was the law of the land, and I felt good about it.
At the time, a few states allowed betting on sports, but most didn't. Bradley's bill, the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act, effectively banned it, except in states where it already existed, like Nevada. It was a weird law because it didn't ban sports gambling directly. It banned states from regulating it. But it accomplished what Bradley wanted, to prevent people from betting on sports. What were the values that were kind of threatened or challenged by gambling?
I didn't want players to be roulette chips. I wanted to protect the purity of the game, the values that were important to me, and gambling polluted that in a very fundamental way.
How gambling did that was obvious to most of the Senate. It encouraged athletes to throw games or rig them. It encouraged fans to think about their bets rather than the game. It introduced money where money really didn't belong in sports. The Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act passes in 1992 with hardly a peep of protest or anything else. Once the senators from Nevada are assured that they can keep doing whatever they want to do inside their state, opposition inside the U.S. Senate totally vanishes. Outside of Nevada, it's illegal to be a bookie. It's okay to place a bet with a friend, but it's against the law to run a sports book. And America appears to be simply pleased to have Bill Bradley's values embedded in its laws.
I thought this was very quiet. I mean, I thought, okay, I passed the law. It's now illegal, not the law of the land. A few New Jersey casino people were pissed, but there are a couple people, nobody came up to me ever and said, why did you pass that casino bill? Never.
I want to pause for a moment to point out how volatile our country is. No other culture on the planet experiences the same violent swings between virtue and vice, between freedom and repression, between fear and greed. Sports gambling is a good example of it.
Gambling's always been a part of American history. George Washington bet on cockfights.
David Hill's a writer who grew up in Arkansas. Like Spanky, in a family of gamblers. So out of curiosity, he set out to write a book about the country's long relationship with this particular vice.
Sports gambling really began with betting on foot races in early America, and that evolved into betting on the fights, first bare knuckle fights and then more sort of sanctioned boxing matches, which were really put on just so that people could gamble on them.
We don't seem to have sports ever without gambling on sports. And Americans have always been fanatical gamblers. At the same time, Americans have always been extremely hostile to gambling. At the turn of the last century, anti-gambling forces got the upper hand for a while.
They shut down a lot of racetracks when they passed these anti-gambling laws. And without any horses to bet on, the bookmakers who made their living booking bets on the horses went to the ballpark.
In other words, when Americans were told they couldn't bet on horses anymore, they figured out a way to bet on people. In horse racing, the odds aren't fixed until the betting stops and are driven by how much is bet on any given horse. If everyone bet on the same horse, they wouldn't bother to run the race. In baseball, or really any other sport, that clearly wouldn't work. The bookie needed a way to attract interest in both teams before the game, even if one team was obviously a lot better than the other. Enter an underrated American genius named Charles McNeil.
He created this idea of the point spread, where you would give the favorite a certain number of points that they would have to lay to the underdog, so that the proposition between these two teams is as close to an even money proposition as possible, right? You're spotting the worst team a certain number of points. And McNeil was a pretty bright guy.
Was he a Wall Street guy?
He was, yeah. He was a Wall Street guy and worked in finance as it was back then, right? And he saw sports and the ability to bet on sports as just another market.
Once Americans learned to bet on people instead of horses, it wasn't long before people started to fix the games. Various point-shaving and game-fixing scandals plagued college basketball in the years before and during Bill Bradley's college career. They obviously had an effect on Bradley. His law that prevented states from legalizing sports gambling was to make just this sort of thing a lot less likely to happen. But one thing the law didn't accomplish: to stop the betting. to stop Spanky, or likely anyone else in New Jersey who operated in the illegal markets.
A bookmaker needs to meet you on the corner of 46th and 7th and hand you a bag full of cash. And that's kind of what got my wife nervous, what my mom nervous, and you know.
So this literally happened. You actually got given cash.
Oh, all the time. All the time. Got given cash, gave cash, received and gave cash all the time.
More on that in just a moment. Spanky graduates from high school, goes to Rutgers, graduates summa cum laude in computer science and finance, all the while still betting on sports. After college, he takes a job on Wall Street. It's now 2001, and he has computers and the internet and access to illegal bookies across the country. He writes programs that allow him to, in effect, see the entire national sports betting market. No one else is doing this, so far as he can tell. He alone can see that the bookie in Pittsburgh has different lines on games than the bookie in South Florida, and that neither one agrees with the bookie in Hoboken. Spanky realizes that he can exploit the different lines. Say the New York Giants are playing the San Francisco 49ers, and the Giants are favored. But the bookie in New York has them as 7-point favorites, and the bookie in San Francisco has them as 4-point favorites. Spanky can bet on the 49ers in San Francisco and bet on the Giants in New York. He's making riskless bets. Whoever wins the game, Spanky will win at least one of the bets. If the Giants win by either 5 or 6 points, he wins them both. He figures all this out while working on Wall Street. His employer has no idea. And neither, it seems, do the bookies.
This is one of these things, you start learning that there's a bias depending on the geographic region, and then you start picking up on these things and saying, my God, these discrepancies are real. And then, it just, it just snowballs from there.
What you're doing in a funny way is exploiting fan emotion. That you got the fans in LA who want to bet on the Lakers and the fans in New York who want to bet on the Knicks. And they distort the odds.
Exactly. And the bookmaker knows that the majority of his customers are going to bet on that fan emotion. And that's when I come in and I just scoop up the value on the other side.
He's scooping up the values. And by 2003, he's asking himself a question. Why am I wasting my time on Wall Street? Why not just quit and become a full-time sports gambler?
I had my mother-in-law, my mother, my brother, my wife's family all have individual conversations with me, asking me if I was sure of this, or are you sure about this? Nobody gambles for a living. Are you out of your mind?
Spanky knows that's not true. People do gamble for a living. Lots of people. They just don't advertise it. But to Spanky's way of thinking, betting on sports isn't any worse than working on Wall Street.
This isn't something that I just took on a whim. I'm a risk-averse guy. I want to make sure that it's going to work before I actually take that step forward.
You're not betting on the sports in the sense that you're not depending on your superior knowledge of sports. You're just arbitraging sports books.
Exactly.
He's becoming Bill Bradley's worst nightmare. In Spanky's world, the games themselves are beside the point. He's no longer even watching the games, just the lines.
No matter what sport it was, the underlying asset didn't matter. It was just great. It was just printing money at that time.
He's no longer even doing anything illegal. There's no law against placing a sports bet. The law simply forbids making a book. It's the bookies he's using who are breaking the law. And there's some differences between Spanky's new trading business and his old job on Wall Street. What's the largest amount of cash you got handed or you handed over, and what's the scariest situation you found yourself in?
Largest cash, it was probably close to $1 million. If I'm not, it was probably $1 million. I was thinking, those are few and far in between, but several hundred thousands was always the case.
Was it always $100 bills?
Always, yeah, always. Unless somebody, if the guy didn't like you, then he would give you 20s and stuff, and that would suck. But,
they give you nickels.
Yeah. Then it's drug money too. That's another thing. Where I remember picking up a package, I think it was 700,000, and most of it was all 20s and 10s, and I was like, God, this is disgusting. Like, this is definitely drug money or whatever it was. But listen, I'm just a gambler picking up my winnings.
So what were they handed to you in, like a briefcase?
In a bag, it was in a bag, just a plastic bag or in a book bag or whatnot. I was dealing with one guy, and he goes, my boss wants to see you first before he pays you. So I go and meet him at this, abandoned restaurant that, whatever. And that's a scary, and then, he's there.
In New Jersey?
This is in Jersey, in North Jersey. And it's in a restaurant.
And The Sopranos is airing.
Exactly. And the guy, I think, ran a tanning salon or something or whatever it was. I don't even remember. But I went to this restaurant, and then, he goes, why should I pay you this money? And then I go, because I won it fair and square, and if I would have lost, I would have paid you. And then he just looked me in the eye, and it was at that moment where you're thinking, am I going to walk out of here alive? Like, what's happening here? Like, what are they doing? And then he just looked at me, he goes, I believe you. And then he motioned to another guy at the table, and the guy handed me the bag. And that was that.
Spanky's world may be a little seedy, but it has its own values. They're just a bit different from Bradley's. Values like keep your word and your mouth shut. See when the odds are off and exploit them. Take the right end of any stupid bet. Spanky's good at all of this. He makes more money as a sports gambler than he ever did on Wall Street. He's living his life in the shadows and thinks that maybe no one will ever notice him. But he's dealing with people who are breaking the law. And the law is listening.
So they got us on some of these wiretaps thinking, oh my God, we know these illegal bookmakers are operating illegally, and then they're giving money to this guy Spanky. That means Spanky must be this kingpin bookmaker. And they rounded up everybody. I was accused of a crime I didn't commit, and that's the God's honest truth. Whether anyone wants to believe me or not, I wasn't a bookmaker. I was just a bettor.
It didn't really matter what he was. Spanky faced a nasty choice. He could defend himself in court and risk years in prison, or he could cut a deal and walk. How much did they get?
For me, they got, I think, about $750,000.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
They just took it.
Yes, just took it, yeah.
They took $750,000. You plead guilty to a felony. And what are the consequences of that? You don't spend any time in jail, right?
I spent 2 nights in jail.
And Spanky's now a convicted felon, but that part he's kind of okay with.
The felony did nothing. I couldn't coach my son's baseball team because, they do background checks, and if all of a sudden so that was like the big hit to me. Other than that, I can't vote, which I've never voted anyway. I can't own a gun, which I've never owned a gun anyway. And I can't serve on a jury, which is actually a plus, because anytime I get called for jury duty, I just tell them I'm a felon, and they go, oh, sorry, and that's it, it's over. So it really wasn't that bad.
Yes, there was this law to stop the spread of sports gambling. And yes, the feds occasionally went and arrested people. But even the cops who arrested Spanky didn't seem to have their hearts in it.
The pinch happens in October. So I have my attorney calling up the DA's office saying, listen, my client needs his computers back. My client needs his computers back. And then eventually the ADA wound up telling my lawyer, he goes, tell Spanky we're going to give him his fucking computers back before football season starts. And lo and behold, in August, I get a call from Queen saying, your computers are ready to be picked up. And I went I go pick up my computer. So they know that I'm going to continue betting.
So Spanky gets his stuff back and he can get his bets down on NFL games. Right after that, New Jersey holds a referendum on sports gambling. This is in 2011. The referendum puts a simple question to a popular vote. Should sports betting be legal in New Jersey? 2/3 of the voters say yes. The vote has no practical effect. Bradley's law is federal law and overrides the results of a state referendum. But the referendum tells you something. 2/3 of the people Bill Bradley represented don't like his ban on sports betting. They agree with Spanky. And Spanky thinks, time is now my friend. Many, many people who knew Bill Bradley as a basketball player just sort of assumed that he would one day be president of the United States. He was so obviously what was best in America. But Bradley was always saying it's not the right time to run. But in the year 2000, just as Spanky's really getting going as a sports gambler, Bill Bradley finally ran for president. Michael Jordan endorsed him. So did many of his former teammates and Senate colleagues, even though Bradley was running against a sitting incumbent, Vice President Al Gore. Turned out it still wasn't the right time.
Following the results on Tuesday night, I've decided to withdraw from the Democratic race for president. We have been defeated, but the cause for which I ran has not been. The cause of trying to create a new politics in this country, the cause of trying to fulfill our special promise as a nation. That cannot be defeated by 1 or 100 defeats.
What was it about Bill Bradley that failed to appeal to his fellow citizens? He always exemplified these great values, but I've always thought his values were the problem. When push comes to shove, we want to live like Spanky, not like Bill Bradley. Your view of the purity of sport is, I share it, but it's old-fashioned.
I don't think it's old-fashioned at all.
Nope.
No. You ever shoot 500 shots in a row and do 100 push-ups and run 10 miles to get into shape, to be the best you could be? Is that old-fashioned?
Nope. I swear to God, in that moment, I felt 11 years old all over again.
People don't do that so they can make, a bet. They do that because they want to be the best at what they do. I don't think that's old-fashioned at all. That's what kids need. They need to be able to have parents that say, look at the way Steph Curry practices. That's what you want to say to your kid. And if your kid isn't interested in that, but all he's interested in is a parlay bet with 15 teams in a game on Saturday night, that's we are living in a different world, and we've lost something precious to all of us. And the problem is a lot of people don't know they're about to lose it.
Or people know they're about to lose it, and they don't care. There was always more than one New Jersey. And the other New Jersey, it wants a piece of the action.
Welcome to the Garden State, baby.
That's next. Against the Rules is written and hosted by me, Michael Lewis, and produced by Lydia Jean Cott, Catherine Girardeau, and Ariella Markowitz. Our editor is Julia Barton. Our engineer is Jake Gorski. Our music was composed by Matthias Bossi and John Evans of Stellwagen Symphonette. Our fact checker is Lauren Vespoli. Against the Rules is a production of Pushkin Industries. To find more Pushkin podcasts, listen on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you'd like to listen ad-free and learn about other exclusive offerings, don't forget to sign up for a Pushkin Plus subscription at pushkin.fm/plus or on our Apple show page.
You have to be able to differentiate between the mics. Chinese Mike is my partner, but he's not even Chinese. He's actually Vietnamese. But we call him Chinese Mike because it's just shorter.
I want you to give me my nickname. If I'm gonna come join you as a partner, I can't be Mike anymore. I gotta be something else.
Moneyball Mike, if I think that's
Would that work?
Yeah, I think
All right. I think I would go by Moneyball Mike.